Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're going to get started here in just a moment. In the meantime, hope you take advantage of this virtual world and grab a pair of comfy socks or another sweatshirt to stay comfy at home. One of the benefits, right, to virtual world. We see a lot of attendees joining in right now, and we'll get started here momentarily when we have most in the room. Hope your week has been off to a great start. A lot of folks wonder what day of the week it is these days. So it's Thursday, in case you're all wondering, and hope your December is off to a great start. Jim, Chris, and I have been looking forward to this event. So today's a great day for us. Get to hear some input from you and share some things that we've been hearing. So thanks again for joining us today. I was talking with my my 9-year-old daughter the last couple of days, talking about what a webinar is, and she's like, "I'm not quite sure what that is, Dad," because she's doing Zoom calls every day for school. So I had to try to describe the difference between a webinar and Zoom. Today we won't have cameras and microphones on for all the participants, of course. So that was the big difference. And she's like, "Well, how do you guys all have conversations?" And I'm like, "Well, webinar is just a little different, you know." So she, I think she got her head wrapped around that one, but wasn't interested in attending a webinar. So I thought that was pretty funny. All right, so looking at time here, about 10:02, and I think we'll go ahead and get started here. Keep all on time. So this is a 1-hour webinar, and we'll go ahead and get started now. So hello, everyone. On behalf of the team here at Mass Ingenuity, welcome. We're so pleased that you have joined us today. Our webinar is focused on virtual team leadership. So the fact that we're all doing this virtually, I think, is pretty relevant and appropriate. And I can see by the participant list today that we have people joining us from a dozen different states and Canada, you can see as well. So I guess good morning, maybe good afternoon to some of you. And if this is smack dab on your lunch hour, thank you, appreciate you being here. Today's webinar will be pretty interactive, although we don't have video cameras and microphones for participants today. We would love to hear your questions, and you'll see there within the control panel, you have a chance to submit those, and we'll have a team reviewing those, and we'll have a Q&A a little later. So please engage in that way. And we also have a poll that we'd like to do 3 different times. So you'll see here on the screen on the right-hand side, there's a mention of menti.com. So this is where you can grab your favorite device. You can even use the computer that you're on. It's basically, we'll just have you find a browser here shortly, and I'll show those instructions again here in just a little bit, but we'd love to have your interaction in that way as well. So with that, let me introduce the team a little bit. With me is my colleagues, Christine Barker and Jim Clark.
Hello, everyone.
We've all had the awesome opportunity to work with many of you that are on this webinar and many other organizations. So essentially, we help clients with the many facets of enterprise performance management. And through these experiences, bringing methods and tools and technology, we're in a position to kind of roll up our sleeves and help teams directly. And other times we're in the space of providing advice and recommendations. And we're always thrilled to be doing that. It's also uniquely positioned us to learn from diverse organizations, people, and a lot of different ideas. So our intention today is to hear a bit from you, also to reflect back what we've been hearing from all of you and many other organizations, given the many challenges we've all been facing with virtual team leadership in 2020. Has been tough, you know, just trying to keep noses above water with the current workload, spending some proactive time to work on improvements is a challenge right now. Making data-driven decisions has been tough. Oftentimes we're moving too fast to slow down and let the data help point us where we'd like to go. Achieving more with less is another challenge. Folks' resources are more strained, and it seems like the work is coming in quicker than the group can get after it with this level of urgency that's been really tough. Maintaining team alignment and focus. The team is felt like more of a working group than a team is what some folks have felt. And that, they've lost some of that natural cohesion and connection. Also, another challenge has been around fostering shared ownership with individual accountability, engaging employees meaningfully, and implementing and tracking initiatives and projects. So all those are a host of different things folks have shared with us. And apologies for not allowing you to reflect back what you've been experiencing this year. But our presentation today has been built around trying to help share some strategies around navigating those challenges. And so, Aaron, at this time, if you can move forward to the hero's journey slide, that would be appreciated. As we move there, this is a tool that, as a practice, we've been using for many years. It just seems so much more relevant in 2020. It's essentially a classic story structure that's been shared by many storytellers worldwide. This has been around for a number of decades, and it was coined by an academic named Joseph Campbell. And it really is a common template for those epic stories. For example, like Star Wars, that's the one that comes to mind for me. And essentially, it talks about, a hero goes on an adventure. They end up being victorious through a real decisive crisis. And then they come home and they're changed, they're transformed going forward. And I just think this sounds so familiar to many of us that have been navigating 2020 in all of the different parts of the adventure we've been on. And so the hero's journey are the steps that hero takes in order to complete the path to their purpose. So that first one, that call to adventure, it really gets the story rolling. There's usually this large disruption of comfort for the hero as they are presented a challenge or a quest that must be undertaken. So, thinking of Star Wars, the original trilogy, for those that are enthusiasts out there, specifically episode 4, right, where we first meet Luke and the whole cast. This is where Luke heard Princess Leia asking Obi-Wan for some help, and Obi-Wan said, Luke, you got to do this. We need you. And so that was the call to adventure in that movie for that hero. And it's also important to note that this starts the process of moving from a world that feels simple to being much more complex. Essentially, things get more uncertain, less comfortable. There's more ambiguity. There's more distraction and temptation and self-doubt and all these different things that come up. And so this is part of that road of trials. This is where you kind of want to wonder, is this hero ever going to get a break? They just keep running into barrier after barrier. So that road of trials is a very important time because it begins to help the hero identify like who they are, but it's typically not the pleasant part of the journey, which then all leads into the supreme ordeal or the abyss. And for the hero, this is where the most hopelessness occurs, while at the same time there's this decision by the hero to try something new, to believe in themselves for what they have learned. So for Luke, I think the road of trials in the abyss was everything from him, trying out the lightsaber for the first time and not doing well. He even got stuck in a trash compactor, which I think for most of us that hasn't happened in 2020, which we should all be pretty thankful for. But and then ultimately the abyss when he saw Obi-Wan not survive the Darth Vader battle, and then ultimately knew that his planet that all his friends are on might be blown up by the Death Star. So for him, that was the abyss. That then leads into the boon. And this is where you see self-doubt in the hero become self-confidence. And you also see some of the skills that have been taught, they're put into practice. And the hero is starting to see some results. And so this is a pretty important part. And for Luke, this is essentially when he was successful in, blowing up the Death Star. Was it a photon or some kind of torpedo, right? With Han Solo helping out. So this was the boon for Luke. And this was kind of the point in which he moved into the master of both worlds phase. And this is where the hero is transformed. They're changed. They almost move into this comfort, this simplicity now that they've learned the skill and they're a performer that can practice it well. And so most heroes don't want to go back to the original version they had before the call to adventure. They're typically actually now saying, hey, I prefer life in this new way, and it does feel more simple. And then there's about 6 more episodes, right, in the story. So there's multiple versions to the hero's journey, of course. I don't know for you, but for me, I felt that this year has included a handful of different adventures. The call to adventure was like a big invite with a lot of stuff inside. So, and that's what I've been hearing from clients as well. On the next slide, we just wanted to basically show the same hero's journey, but have you begin to think about what has been your journey so far in 2020? As you reflect on the year, what was the specific call to adventure for you? What has the road of trials included for you? And what about for your team? In a moment, I'm going to ask Chris and Jim to share a little bit about maybe what they've heard from clients on this. For me, it was actually just in the last, probably about 3 weeks ago, met with a client, and they shared that the hardest part of their journey this year has been this overwhelming sense of being isolated, where in their entire career they felt completely connected. And it's not like things have slowed down or communicating is less, frequent now. It's actually quite the opposite. There's a lot more work. There's a lot more communication. The team is interacting more frequently, but there's still this overwhelming sense of like, I feel like I'm going it alone this year, almost like the survival mode. So that person is seeking some new ways to connect with her team in a more meaningful way. And her sense of resilience and fortitude is really there. She was saying like, I'm pretty strong-willed and I don't easily quit. She goes, I've been tested this year a lot, so I'm ready to kind of move into the next phase with the team. So that's what I've been hearing so far. Christine, would you be willing to share as well?
Yeah. Yes. Thanks, and thanks for everyone joining. What I've been hearing is with my clients related to kind of their strategic direction. COVID has impacted the way our clients do business. Just no way about it, right? Resources are being cut left and right, shifting to COVID priorities, social unrest, and how agencies need to really think about, really serving everyone in their state, right? And looking at addressing social determinants of inequities, things that they knew were a priority now is front and center. So all those complexities of, less resources, where they need to drive their strategic plan, they're in the abyss and they're struggling, right? And now doing it remotely. And, how do they all get back in sync, and where do they drive now with the less resources? It's a struggle for them.
Thank you, Chris. And Jim.
Yeah, so I was working recently with a team, and half the team was working from the office and the other half is working remotely, which many of us are experiencing now. And just prior to COVID, a little bit of a complication, the team was actually reorganized and 3 new people were brought onto this team, and boom, then COVID hits right back in March. So this team, I would say, quickly went through the road of trials and fell quickly into the abyss, right? And they stayed there for a long period of time for specific reasons, right? They lacked clear goals and objectives. The team members are working hard. They're doing the best they can. They don't have a real sense for how the overall team is doing, and that's tough for a lot of folks. And so they're feeling very disconnected. They're confused. They're saying, hey, I'm just frustrated. I don't feel like I can see that we're moving forward. And they didn't have any consistent processes or tools to foster any kind of connection and alignment. So they were in a very tough situation. I think many of us on the call probably can relate to that. And so I would say, truthfully, today, and I've just been working with this team for a short period of time, they're still in the abyss, but we're actually starting to implement some team-based measures, some simple routines, and this team is starting to get their feet under them. They're starting to see a little light at the end of the tunnel, seeing some actual improvements in what they're doing, because they have some shared goals. And so I think the takeaway for me is that it takes intentional action and some signs of hope and improvement to start moving people up that curve and out of the abyss. It's something you have to do intentionally.
Yeah, thank you, Jim and Christine. Yeah, so it's interesting as we work with clients that are essentially teams that trying to accomplish whatever mission or work they have. We're also back in our workspace as a team trying to navigate some of these challenges too. So just seeing both of you kind of in your home office, it's been fun kind of figuring this journey out together. This was going to be a point in which we actually had you participate in another poll, but let me actually tee it up as more of a self-reflection. So question we've asked many different groups this year is, how would you describe in 1 or 2 words what it's felt like to be a team leader this year in the virtual world? You got to summarize it in 1 or 2 words. Like what is the key word for you, or 2? And has it been similar throughout, or have you found the ups and downs and the twists and curves to be part of the adventure? So in other words, you might have felt very different at different points during the year. And then second, if you were to kind of pinpoint maybe somewhere just today on the hero's journey, where would you see yourself and your team? Would you consider yourself, in the road to trials? Are you, smack dab in the middle of the abyss right now? Kind of that supreme ordeal is your day right now, or do you find yourself kind of moving up into that next master of both worlds from the hero's journey curve? So maybe just kind of mentally place a spot on the curve where you're at now.
Yeah. And maybe people could share in the chat, if you want to share your 1 or 2 words or where you are in the hero's journey. I'd love to see where you are.
Yeah, so for today, in a moment, Jim's going to start us off talking through some of the framing for some of the ideas and strategies and best practices we'd like to share with you. So just like to have you continue to keep in mind for yourself, what is the one challenge or one area that you're hoping to take away from today to help your team get to that next level and for yourself as a leader. So Jim, as we move into this next slide, turn it over to you.
All right, very good. Leanne, one more here. All right, very good. So it's interesting. I see that hero's journey. I think I can reflect back on so many of those kind of journeys I've been on in my life. Like, for example, moving in for the first time with my wife, and so it's a whole new learning process. I don't know if I've mastered both worlds yet, but I'm still working on that. But the fact is, I think we're all in various stages of transformation. So this slide is a very important slide contextually that kind of sets up some of our other discussions. Because leading teams in this virtual world is a challenge we're all sharing right now, right? I mean, we've all had to adapt to new approaches, learn new tools. We're learning new tools, right? It's not perfect. So we're all still learning and adapting. And so we're all going through our own hero's journey as we're having to learn new ways of doing business when everything has changed around us. So each of us has had to been forced to really rethink how we get our work done without being physically located near our team, right? I mean, we're all kind of working in our home offices or in our offices remotely, and many of us aren't even in the same zip code right now. So we just don't have those impromptu hallway conversations to share updates and make connections like we used to. So take a minute to think about all the ways in which your job and how you interact with your team has completely been disrupted and changed since everything kind of went virtual 9 months ago. Just take a minute to think about that. It's pretty staggering. We've all adjusted, done the best we can, but it's been a big change to where we were, 9, 10 months ago. So as you reflect on that, saying that have you ever heard the old saying, the more things change, the more they remain the same? You ever heard that? I mean, my high school statistic teacher used to tell us all the time, hey, we're learning all these new concepts, your head's going to explode. The simple fact of the matter is the concepts are still the same, basically. And so think of it this way. Every organization has these 3 essential elements you see on the screen to be successful that you have to manage: people, process, and technology. And even in a post-COVID world where everything seems different, these 3 elements are actually remaining the same. And in fact, at Mass Ingenuity, they're nearly at the core of everything that we do. If we think about, we had this conversation the other day, if we think about our change management work, our performance management system, our results software, all of those elements are connected to these 3 domains. But kind of here's the really interesting thing. The true currency that drives value across these three domains is data. One word, it's data. Let me share you a couple interesting facts. At least I find them very interesting. According to Gartner, who's an expert in the industry of IT and data and information, study they did, by 2022, 90% of all organizational strategies will explicitly include data and analytics as part of their key initiatives. It's pretty impressive. And by 2023, so 1 year after that, they're predicting that data analytics will become a primary driver of enterprise value. So whether you're a public entity or a private entity, if they're driving, this is going to be critical to driving value with data analytics. And why is this true? There's many reasons, but managing data is really proven. It's a proven strategy to do more with less, to drive better performance with the same or fewer resources. And that's especially true during a time of dramatic budget cuts, which we're all going through, and remote workforces and so on. So the bottom line is, as leaders, understanding data allows us to do some pretty important things. First, set priorities and expectations, track performance, identify constraints, allocate resources. Very important element is data. And even if you're frontline managers, it allows frontline managers to proactively manage their teams kind of on a daily and weekly basis, regardless of where they're physically located. So there's that anchor. So in our experience, one of the keys to success in this world of working with many different clients, as Tom mentioned, is having that single, easy to use source of all of your relevant measures, one that everybody can access on a daily basis. And so simply put, the insights, that's why it's in the center of this slide, the insights that are provided by data create the thread that binds together people, processes, and technology. That's really the secret sauce of performing in a virtual world, and helping teams move out of the abyss is using data. And something we've also learned, it's something we've learned from working with our clients, right? The more we work with our clients in those three domains, what we find is insights, actionable insights, are what power teams forward toward improvement. So it's the foundation of a data-driven culture. So now, next slide, Tom. So there's a lot of meat on the bone of that slide, people, process, technology. I want to talk a little bit about the people side before I turn it over to Chris to talk about the other two. Of course, we've all heard some version of Peter Drucker's quote, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast," right? We've either heard it or maybe even said that. And in our experience, working with organizations, kind of large and small, it absolutely still rings true. And we've identified kind of three things that I want to talk to briefly that all leaders can do to optimize team performance and culture in a virtual world that we're all having to deal with. So first, and it's a little counterintuitive because we've been talking about data, but the first thing you really need to focus on is the people and the people connection, right? Actively cultivating human connection and personalizing your meetings is super important. You know, showing a little empathy, how are people doing, using a little humor at the start of a meeting helps folks connect when you're not physically with each other. And that takes some intention, right? You got to create good habits. Keeping cameras on. You know, I've worked with many teams recently. I know Chris and Tom the same. When you get on a Zoom meeting or on a GoToMeeting, everybody clicks on their cameras on. They immediately turn their cameras off, and it completely just disconnects folks from each other. So encouraging your team to, hey, let's keep our cameras on. We don't care how we look, right? We're working together. We know we're at home. Keep our cameras on, avoiding distractions. Just mute your microphone if you're not talking. Very important. But as a leader, spend less time talking and more time listening. It's particularly important in this particular time where we're operating virtually. And another tip that many of our clients are using, we're using, is ask someone to monitor chat. If you're running a meeting on Zoom or GoToMeeting or MS Teams, have one of your folks kind of co-facilitate and monitor that chat so people can raise questions, offer concerns, and you can facilitate a discussion around that. Very effective way to build engagement and lead a team in a virtual world that we're dealing with. Second, pretty straightforward, setting performance expectations. What we have found is it's very important for folks to eliminate ambiguity and clarify direction. So using data is a great way to set direction and clarify expectations. Also, regularly discussing your priorities with your team on a regular basis builds alignment. when people feel connected and frustrated or confused, talk about, hey, remind them, here are our priorities, and these are the kind of measures we're trying to improve. And it helps translate a lot of complexity into, hey, here's our team's work today, this week, this month. And it builds that alignment, which is super important to get teams to move out of the abyss and up the other side toward, hey, we got this. We can perform despite these challenges. And then lastly, when you're using data, very important to create a safe environment. Getting your teams comfortable with using data to monitor our performance, provide that real-time feedback. Important to just keep the team in learning mode. What are we learning about the business? Being curious, as opposed to, nobody's getting in trouble, or there's nobody is in any way kind of being, feeling made to feel bad about it. And say, hey, this is what we're learning. We understand a constraint. Let's take corrective action. Because when we identify and initiate corrective action as a team, it provides purpose and it gets everybody leaning in, and feeling of accomplishment comes from that. Very important. So lastly, just as it says here, don't forget to recognize and celebrate successes. I think we could all use a few more wins right now. So always take time to do that as you get wins along the way. It helps build momentum. And then just lastly, as consultants, we're working in these domains every day, people, process, and technology. We've talked a little bit about people, but I'm going to turn over to Chris, and she's got some interesting thoughts to share on the other two legs of the stool, which is process and technology. So Chris, turn it to you.
All right. Thanks, Jim. So again, welcome everyone. There's been some challenging times for all of us. I was one of those in the beginning that didn't like to turn on the camera. I have two big dogs in our household, and the craziness, right? And being self-conscious about, camera on and all the noise. But the more I lean into it, when I've been able, like Jim said, to really connect with the people and stop being isolated, it really does help. The next piece, though, is let's talk about process. And when we at Mass Ingenuity, when we talk about it from a couple different angles. Is really first, it's more important when you're the abyss, which it's super hard, right? Because you don't have enough time in the day. But taking the time to step back and looking at the work that your team does in a process orientation. What is the core work that our team does, right? And how can we standardize it, right? What's mission critical? What we're hearing from all of our clients is there is more work than ever on all your plates. Like there's just not enough time in the day to do it all. Your priorities are shifting. So take the time to look at your work, define it in a process kind of orientation, whether even if it's project, right? There's or defining policy, things of that nature, right? There's still standard chunks of work that you do, right? So taking the time so that your team gets really clear on what is the core work that we're doing and what are our priorities. So that's piece one. But then taking it and saying, okay, if this is our core work, right? That's mission critical for our division, our team, our agency, department, right? How do we know if we're doing it well, right? So when I as the leader, right, have to go up and I have to ask for more resources, things of that nature, how do I know? Like, are we using data, right? If we can use data and facts to have that conversation about our core work, much different conversation, right? Aligning the team on, you know what, we're doing well here. We need to look at some improvements here, right? It takes away the emotion on it, and it really kind of sets some groundwork. And what I know, even as a leader, but then when I wear my employee hat, when I know what's expected of me and what does that target look like, I avoid the scenario of, well, go find that rock. Oh no, I picked the wrong rock. You wanted that one, right? It actually is going to help the stress of your teams, right? When they're feeling the abyss, and there's so many distractions in their home environments, right? So your employees that have young children at home and they're all trying to help them, right? We have enough distractions. So getting clear on what the priorities are is critical. And it's your job as a leader, right, to really help define that. So that's one piece of it. The second piece of it, though, is what is the process you are using to do a check-in with your team? So if you have core work, You've defined your metrics and what targets look like. What is the process you are putting in place to track it and have conversations with your team? So it's easy in a virtual world, right, to let the weeks and the days, I can't even, like Tom said, I don't even know what day it is. So how do I make sure that I am checking in and having a team huddle in a virtual world with my camera on, right? How am I checking in with my team? So if we've defined our priorities and we've defined our targets, that regular cadence of tracking performance, right, is going to go a lot easier, right? And it's really going to help the stress of my team. And then we can finally, right, if we're doing those two pieces, right, we're able to work together as a team, right? Drive improvement, anticipate roadblocks. Where do we just do not have enough resources? So, you know, my clients that are dealing with the unemployment claims, right? We've seen them have to add staff like quickly. Imagine if you had to onboard staff and you did not have your core work defined as standard processes, right? It just adds to the abyss and the chaos, right? If you don't have defined work, you know, don't have a way to track your targets, right? And really have conversations. How are you going to onboard new employees, right? I mean, we've been doing this virtual world now since March. It's probably going to go until next June, right? You're going to have to probably hire, even with budget cuts, right? Certain organizations are needing to hire with all the COVID responses they're needing to do. So really kind of putting in, right, a system, right, and working with your team on those processes will be the best thing that you can do for your organization as a leader. So now let's talk about technology. So Erin, next slide. So the final piece of it, we've talked about the people, right? We've talked about them getting comfortable using the technology, getting them comfortable using data. We've talked about defining your core work, really, and using data to understand your core work, to drive improvements and make adjustments. Kind of the secret performance lever that you have that often gets overlooked is really leaning into this technology. So you've had to, right? You're using Microsoft Teams, you're using Skype. Everyone's gotten really comfortable over the last few years using, you know, instant messenger. You know, so we've gotten really comfortable in some other tools, right? But when we think about where we are and the need to really manage data even more so in this virtual world, what tools and technology, right, are helping you drive towards a single source of truth? Okay, so when we think about when I talk to my clients, right, you know, obviously the most tool that everyone uses is Excel, right? You have developed some really nice Excel scorecards to manage your metrics. We've also talked to our clients when the file becomes corrupted, and it's like, or they can't even locate it, right? Or they have version control problems, right? So you're having to send emails, make phone calls, try to get the information on all those Excel sheets. Or you have the newest, hottest tool out there that only your data scientists are comfortable using, right? Again, it's isolated though in one division, right? And it doesn't have all the information on it. So that's when we as our clients, right, when we were helping our clients with process and metrics, we helped develop our result software tool to really help create that single source of truth, okay? And the next piece of it though is looking at it from the change management perspective, really. If you want to drive towards a data-driven culture, getting your people comfortable using data, defining your processes and setting targets, right? You have to make sure everyone is available and approachable, okay? Being intentional on how you're using it and why, right? Building awareness and desire and skill and leaning in towards that technology and the related data, right? You know, my son is a math whiz. He loves data and math. My other daughter loves English, right? She said, I just had my last math final ever. You know, she's a junior in college. I will never have to take math again. Best day ever for her, right? She doesn't, you know, the comfort level with math and And data, right? You have employees like that. How are you helping all of them get comfortable using data and the tools related to it, right? Are you finding a simple, easy to use tool? And the final tip that we see, right, is modeling the use of it. So you're the leader in this virtual world. Are you leading with it? Are you using the tools? Do you have access to your data, right? Are you signing on and looking at your data, right? Do you have your camera on in your meetings, right? Are you having regular check-ins and leading with the data, right? You have to become the master of both worlds first and be the sponsor of it if you want to see the change and really stabilize your team so they can get out of the abyss. And I know together, if we all kind of lean into process, people, and technology, you guys can do it. Sign it over to Tom. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris and Jim. Before we move into the Q&A and share some of the feedback you've all been submitting, which thank you for doing that, we did want to share a couple offers with you as far as a next step. So as we look at the next slide, the first one has to do with some of the work that Jim, Chris, and I are doing. There's actually software that can help a team to do many of the things that we just outlined. You know, everything from helping to have the priorities be central for the team to kind of help create that clarity, remove the ambiguity about next week and next month, but like, what do we want to focus on today as a leader in creating that clarity? You can have it shared real easily through some software that we make available to organizations. Even teams as small as 2 or 3 people are purchasing this software to help them get their daily work and their strategic work visible and improving. Even teams up to about 10 or so, or even larger groups. So the software is set up to meet the size of your team. We're not going to go into much detail on that today, but if you are interested in receiving a demo of the software, you can see some contact information there listed. There's also a PDF of these slides that are in the handout section of the GoToMeeting. But the software can be there to help guide you through the planning, through the actual using data as a team, day to day, week to week, and to really kind of create that culture like Jim talked about around using data to help guide, you know, what do we need to do today? What do we need to hold off on doing today to focus on the things that are most essential? And also around projects. If there are things that folks are running with that are in parallel to what the team is doing, it's a nice kind of all-in-one place. Folks can go just through a browser or on their device to stay connected in that way and to have data help drive the conversations with the group. We wanted to mention, there is a pretty deep discount right now on the software for the next few weeks. We wanted to share that with you as folks that we obviously invited into this for special pricing. You can see the information listed there right off of our website. You can move in and purchase it just through an online shopping cart and type in that coupon code, and you'll essentially receive the software ready to use almost immediately. And you could begin to share that with your team and start collaborating on that at your next team meeting, if that's what you desire to do. But the first offer there around learn more, please don't hesitate to ask us. We have Kelly Ferguson's contact information there, and she'll connect with Jim, Chris, and others within our team to reach out to you right away. We found this to be a very helpful tool that helps to bring the process, the people through some really easy to use technology. So we hope you'll take advantage of that. Let me take a look at some of the messages you're all sending in. We had some folks share both questions as well as where they were at on the hero's journey. And I appreciate you all being flexible with the technology today. Another road to trials moment for me, I guess, on sharing my screen. So, but we had some folks feel, you know, they're on the upswing from the abyss, kind of moving up to the boom. Someone else is in the road of trials phase of their journey. Someone else feels that their key word for this year is organization, and that they see themselves in the boon swing. Feels like, somebody else says, it feels like we bounce between the road of trials to the boon, depending on what the issue is of the day. So sort of that multifaceted, I'm on many adventures all in one day, and it just depends, right? And somebody else made a statement, which could also be a question, and maybe I'll look to Jim on this, and then maybe Chris, if you'd like to do a follow-up. And the statement is around, the workload hasn't increased. It's actually stayed the same. But the priorities weren't clear before all of this, and they're even more unclear now. And leadership hasn't defined that yet. So do you have any kind of words of advice or next steps for a leader that's in that situation where things are less clear, leadership isn't helping to make it more clear? What can a leader do in that situation?
Yeah, so I've actually experienced that with teams in the past, and the first step that I like to recommend is to have the team itself, the leader of the team, work together with their team to say, what do we believe our priorities are? Let's take some initiative and identify what we think our most important work is now, so that there's a starting point, and then have that individual leader take that up to his or her boss and say, hey, we need clearer direction. It's very important to us, and for me to manage my team, we actually pulled this together. We'd like you to either validate or help us clarify these priorities. So it's not, you're not playing the victim and saying, hey, we're struggling, we don't have priorities. We're saying, hey, we know we need them. Let's take a crack at it, and let's validate them up, kind of up the chain of command. And I found that to actually work reasonably well.
And Chris, another question. Thank you, Jim. Another question came in around, we have so much data, we're not quite sure where to start. Any ideas?
Yeah, that's a common thing we hear. I mean, it's organizations have more data than they know what to do with. And so what I would suggest to kind of it's aligned with Jim is really kind of first understand what your priorities are, right? So you have a lot of data, but you have the data on the critical pieces, right? The rest can be just noise, right? Or things that you'll drill down to after you understand what are the critical things, insights, and information we need, right? So really, before you go into the data, having that team conversation about core work that is critical, and then going and saying, and then trying to do an inventory and aligning, right? So if we have more than we can do it, so let's first identify the priorities and then get our arms around those pieces of data before we add more to kind of the leadership scorecard, what I would say.
And Jim, maybe a question for you. This is related to something you had shared a little earlier. Jim had mentioned about trying to make it so that it doesn't feel bad when using data. Can you share some tips on that?
Yeah, it's a very common experience people have is once you start measuring, team members start to feel like, hey, somebody's actually looking over my shoulder and I'm going to get in trouble. If my measure's in red or yellow, I'm going to get in trouble. And so what we coach our clients around is from the get-go, you have to establish an environment where we use measures to learn about our business, our performance, our organization, so we can make improvements and identify constraints and make improvements, but we never use measures punitively, right? And that is very important for the leader to set that tone right from the get-go, to say, look, as we start measuring, we're really wanting to help us clarify and align around what's most important. Let's measure what's most important around the core work of our team, and then let's all see and lean into that. And so it's very important for the leader to set the right tone from the get-go and ask the right questions when a measure's in red or yellow for a team member. The questions are, hey, what are we learning about that process? What is getting in our way? How can I help? As opposed to who's responsible for that, right? It's about setting the right tone. Chris, you have something to add?
Yeah, what I would also say is, especially what we see in state government, there's so much grandfather knowledge of things being passed down from person to person about processes. And what you don't realize is that there's so much variation in your process. So most of the time, the issue is with the process, not the person working it. They might be actually not engaged because the process is so broken, they're so frustrated. If you can get your processes flowing well, your engagement will go up. And we had one of our clients, and for those that are from the organization, you're gonna know who I'm talking about. But he said the power of yellow. and embracing it. The power of yellow, right, is that kind of, it starts the conversation. Ideally, you're not waiting until it's in red and kind of like what he said, the dumpster, it's like, we're really engaging and we're starting that and really embracing it as a learning opportunity. And it's to create a culture of safety.
We had another question or curiosity related to how to manage projects and the core work as was described in some of the earlier slides. So maybe Jim, do you mind talking about the difference between the core work and projects and any initial thoughts on how to navigate balancing those?
Yeah, I'm going to start this off, but I'm actually going to ask Chris to talk more specifically about projects because you guys got such tremendous energy and experience around that. So core work and projects are both important to a team's performance. The core work is the things that you do every day, all day, to kind of meet the mission for your team. And so it's very important to be able to manage those through performance measures. But the same need is there to manage performance against implementing initiatives. It's all about creating visibility to how you're performing on both. And Chris has worked with a number of teams recently that were struggling with that very thing, and they leverage technology to help. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would say from a leader perspective, often the project information is so buried with your project managers. What does your portfolio of project work look like? Have we taken on too much, right? And we can't make good resource, again, the whole priority. Have we launched too much? So most of our projects aren't meeting their targets because we're, diluting our resources. We're not being intentional. So really actually using some data to manage your portfolio of initiatives, doing regular check-ins. It's the same sort of process orientation you want to take to project management so that you can make intentional decisions on which new work we launch. And what I would say is our clients that have embraced technology to really kind of build that portfolio executive summary, right? They're like, oh, yeah, our employees have telling us for a long time that they have too much on their plates. When they can see a scorecard of all the project and initiative works going on, it's like, oh, I get it now. We've launched too much this quarter. We need to scale back, and it needs to wait till Q2 or Q3.
Great, thank you. Looking at time, practicing this new how to run webinars, in addition to having good technology set up, also ending slide. We just wanted to express appreciation for you all, both in the conversations we've been having this year together in client engagements or just friends in the crowd, and also look forward to getting to know some of the others that may be joining for the first time and haven't worked with us before. The one thing I would reinforce or suggest to everybody is, all the ideas here, have been based on experiences that I think we've all had collectively, including the participants on this call. And I've heard one of the number one things for people that makes them feel like they can move in kind of that next phase in the hero's journey has been because they're in the journey with somebody else. So it could be a team member, it could be a colleague somewhere that comes alongside and either helps them out and or folks that are out sharing what's working for them and their team. So my encouragement to you would be, if you're finding things that are working, let others know. This is sort of a time where best practices are being formed in a pretty emergent way. So there will be a survey that will kind of prompt as you exit the webinar today and or via email. So we'd really appreciate your feedback on what was valuable about today and what things you'd like us to help prepare for next time. So please don't be shy with that. Chris and then Jim, what are your thoughts?
Chris?
Yeah, I just say thanks for everyone taking the time. I enjoy the partnership that I have with all my clients, and it has really helped me on a personal note to get out of the abyss, like when I can connect with all of you, I'm at my kitchen table here, right? And so to be able to really have a conversation really adds value to what I experience my day to day. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I feel much the same way with many of the folks on the webinar today. And one thing I would say is that given the challenges we're all facing and going through that hero's journey, is you find yourself going up, what's it called, the boon, Tom, going up the other side of the curve where things are really starting to feel better. The key is to reach back and take some of your coworkers with you, right? Where you become the mentor to say, hey, we're figuring this out. This is working, and help bring those people along. And encourage them to do the same. Because the quicker you get out of the abyss and move up to the other side where you're feeling good about how your team is performing and how you're managing those 3 areas of people, process, and technology, and maybe elevating the use of data, I think you'll find that you're not only your level of engagement, your feeling accomplishment just works a whole lot more fun. And we could all use a little more of that at the moment. Okay, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Good luck on your journey. Hope we get a chat soon, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.